The evening sky had turned a deep purple as Officer Tom Reynolds checked his watch. Just 40 more minutes and his 12-hour shift would finally be over. His back ached from sitting in the patrol car all day and his stomach growled, reminding him of the homemade meatloaf waiting in his fridge. Tom reached for his coffee cup, finding only cold drops at the bottom. He sighed and tossed the empty cup into the passenger seat, where it joined a small collection of protein bar wrappers. Another day of barely eating right. Unit 317, we've got a disturbance call at 1482 Maple Street. The radio crackled to life, the dispatcher's voice cutting through the quiet car. Neighbor reports shouting and possible sounds of fighting. Tom grabbed the radio. Copy that. Unit 317 responding. He recognized the address immediately. Third call in just 2 months. He'd been there for the last one. A domestic dispute that ended with tearful promises to work things out. Lots of shouting but no charges filed. Like so many calls, it had felt unfinished, leaving Tom with that hollow feeling that he'd be back. As he pulled onto Maple Street, Tom noticed how the neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Porch lights glowed in neat rows on most houses, except for the one at 1482, where the light flickered like a dying firefly. The front yard told its own story, grass too tall, toys scattered across the lawn, a bike tipped over near the driveway. Tom parked the patrol car and called in his position. 15 years on the force had taught him to always let someone know where he was. 15 years had also taught him to trust his gut, and right now, his gut was sending warning signals up and down his spine. He stepped out of the car, the cool night air hitting his face. Tom adjusted his body camera, making sure it was recording properly. His hand instinctively checked his utility belt, gun secure, taser ready, radio clipped in place. From the sidewalk, Tom couldn't hear anything unusual coming from the house. No screaming, no sounds of fighting. Sometimes that was worse than noise, that unexpected quiet that comes after something bad. The front porch creaked under his weight as he climbed the 3 wooden steps. A child's stuffed bear sat forgotten on a plastic chair, its button eyes seeming to watch his approach. Tom glanced at it, wondering about the kid who owned it. Was the child inside right now? Safe? Tom knocked firmly on the door. Police? Anyone home? He waited, listening for footsteps, but heard nothing. He knocked again, louder this time. Police officer. I need someone to come to the door. That's when he noticed the door wasn't fully closed. A small gap, maybe half an inch, showed where it hadn't latched properly. Through the gap, he could see a sliver of the living room inside, dark except for the blue glow of a TV playing to an empty room. Hello. This is the police. Is everything okay in there? Tom called out, his hand now resting on his gun. Protocol said wait for backup before entering, but what if someone was hurt inside? What if seconds mattered? A faint sound came from deeper in the house, something between a whimper and a cry. It might have been a child. Tom's heart beat faster. The job had hardened him in many ways over the years, but the thought of a kid in trouble still cut through all his defenses. He pushed the door open slowly, the hinges groaning. Police officer entering the residence. Anyone here? The smell hit him first, something sour and stale hanging in the air. The living room came into view, and Tom felt his stomach tighten. Couch cushions thrown to the floor. A coffee table flipped on its side. Picture frames shattered, glass crunching under his boots as he took careful steps inside. But it was the small collection of toys in the corner that really caught his eye, a neat stack of colorful blocks, a row of tiny cars lined up by size, a doll propped up against the wall. These toys hadn't been disturbed by whatever storm had torn through the rest of the room. They'd been carefully arranged by small hands, creating order in the middle of chaos. Tom unholstered his gun and held it ready, moving deeper into the house. Police? Anyone here? I'm here to help. The blue TV light flickered against the walls as he passed through the living room, casting strange shadows that seemed to move with him. Somewhere inside this house, Tom knew he would find something that would change him forever. Tom moved deeper into the house, his gun held ready, each footstep careful and deliberate. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight, no matter how lightly he stepped. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing more of the mess, a broken lamp on the floor, A wall with a fist-sized hole punched through the drywall, a half-empty bottle of whiskey tipped over on a side table, its contents soaked into the carpet. "Police officer, is anyone here?" Tom called out again. His voice sounded too loud in the quiet house, bouncing off the walls and coming back to him. Still no answer. The living room opened up to a small kitchen. Unwashed dishes were piled high in the sink. Takeout containers littered the counter, some with food still inside, now growing fuzzy with mold. Tom wrinkled his nose at the smell. On the fridge door, held by colorful magnets, were children's drawings, stick figures of what looked like a family, with "I love you, Mommy" written in wobbly letters at the bottom of one. Tom felt a tightness in his chest. Those drawings were recent. The child who made them lived here, in this mess, in this sadness. He moved back into the hallway, stepping around a toppled bookshelf. Books and photo albums lay scattered across the floor. Tom's flashlight caught one photo that had fallen out. A smiling woman holding a little girl on her lap, both laughing at the camera. The picture couldn't have been taken more than a year ago. The happiness in that frozen moment seemed a world away from the current state of the house. Further down the hallway, 3 doors stood closed. Tom tried the first one on the left, pushing it open with his foot while keeping his gun ready. It was a bathroom. Towels thrown on the floor, medicine cabinet open with bottles spilled into the sink. Nothing unusual for the chaos of this house, but no people. The next door revealed a child's bedroom. Unlike the rest of the house, this room showed signs of care. The small bed was made, with a worn teddy bear sitting against the pillow. Crayon drawings hung on the walls. A nightlight shaped like a star cast a soft yellow glow across the room. Tom scanned the area, checking under the bed and in the closet. Empty. That left one more door at the end of the hall. As Tom approached it, he heard something, a soft sound, like someone trying not to be heard. He tensed, adjusting his grip on his gun. He placed his ear against the door. There it was again, a quiet whimper, followed by a gentle shh. "Police." "I'm coming in," Tom announced, then counted to 3 in his head before pushing the door open, leading with his flashlight and gun. What he saw made him lower his weapon immediately. The bedroom was a mess, like the rest of the house. Clothes were strewn about, drawers left open, makeup scattered across a vanity. But it wasn't the mess that caught Tom's attention. A woman lay on the floor beside the bed, one arm outstretched, the other curled against her chest. Her eyes were closed, her breathing so shallow Tom had to look carefully to make sure she was alive. Beside her, a small girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, sat cross-legged on the floor. The child was gently stroking the woman's hair, her tiny hand trying to smooth the tangled strands. "Mommy's sleeping," the little girl whispered, looking up at Tom with wide, serious eyes. "She gets really tired sometimes." Tom holstered his gun instantly. He knelt down, still keeping some distance so as not to frighten the child. "Hi there," he said softly. "My name is Officer Tom. What's your name?" "Annie," the little girl answered. She didn't seem scared of him, just tired. Like this wasn't the first time she'd met a police officer. Like this wasn't the first time she'd had to explain her mommy's sleeping. "Is your mommy sick, Annie?" Tom asked, his eyes scanning the woman for visible injuries. Annie nodded. She took her medicine and then she got really sleepy. The girl's voice was matter-of-fact, no trace of panic or fear. Just a child who had learned to cope with things no child should have to face. Tom felt something inside him crack. Not a fast break like glass shattering, but a slow, deep split like ice giving way beneath too much weight. This little girl, this child with her innocent eyes and careful hands, had been taking care of her mother when it should have been the other way around. Tom took a deep breath and reached for his radio, keeping his voice steady as he called for an ambulance. "I need medical assistance at 1482 Maple Street. Adult female, unconscious but breathing. Possible overdose. Child present at the scene." He turned back to Manny, who was still stroking her mother's hair with such gentle care that it made his throat tighten. "Help is coming for your mommy, okay? The doctors are going to make her feel better." Annie nodded, her small face serious. "They came before. The doctors with the big truck." Tom felt his heart sink. So this had happened more than once. As he looked closer at the woman, he noticed the track marks on her arm. The pieces came together in his mind. The disturbance calls, the state of the house, the woman's unconscious form, and most devastating of all, the little girl who seemed to know exactly what to do when her mother was sleeping. "Annie, is there anyone else here with you? Any other grown-ups? Maybe your daddy or grandma?" Tom asked gently. The little girl shook her head. "Just me and Mommy. Daddy went to heaven." She pointed to a photo on the nightstand that Tom hadn't noticed, a man in an army uniform, smiling broadly. "I see," Tom said, his chest feeling heavier by the second. "You've been taking really good care of your mommy, haven't you?" Annie nodded proudly. "I'm a big girl. I make us cereal and I know how to be quiet when Mommy needs to sleep." Tom blinked hard, fighting back the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. "You are a big girl, a very brave one." He noticed a small stuffed rabbit peeking out from under the bed. "Is that your bunny?" Annie followed his gaze and reached for the toy, pulling it close to her chest. "This is Hoppy. He helps me be brave when Mommy is sleeping." "That's good," Tom said, trying to keep his voice normal. "Everyone needs a friend like Hoppy." He could hear sirens in the distance now, growing louder. Soon the quiet house would be filled with paramedics and their equipment. Tom knew he needed to prepare Annie for what was coming. "Annie, some doctors are coming to help your mommy. They're going to take her to the hospital where she can get better. They might be a little loud, but don't be scared, okay? They're here to help." "Will they give her medicine?" Annie asked, her fingers nervously playing with Hoppy's ears. Tom hesitated. "They'll give her the right kind of medicine, the kind that will really help her." He stood up and quickly looked around the room, noticing an oversized t-shirt on the floor that looked clean enough. He picked it up. "Would you like to put this on over your pajamas? It might be a little chilly outside." Annie nodded and let Tom help her slip the shirt over her head. It hung down past her knees like a dress. As he helped her, Tom noticed bruises on her skinny arms, not the kind that suggested abuse, but the kind that came from a child playing without enough supervision, getting hurt with no one to kiss it better. The sirens grew louder until they stopped outside. Flashing lights now pulsed through the bedroom window, painting the walls red and blue. "They're here," Tom said. "Annie, would you like to wait in another room while they help your mommy? You can bring Hoppy." But Annie shook her head firmly. "I have to stay with Mommy. She gets scared when she wakes up alone." The front door opened and Tom heard the paramedics entering the house. He called out to guide them to the bedroom, then turned back to Annie. "I need to talk to the doctors for a minute. I'll be right over there by the door, okay? You can see me the whole time." Annie nodded, her eyes wide, as she watched the paramedics enter with their bags and equipment. As Tom stepped aside to brief the medical team, he couldn't stop looking back at the little girl. She sat there clutching her stuffed rabbit, watching everything with eyes that had seen too much, understood too much. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside him. A change he couldn't yet name, but would come to recognize as the beginning of a promise he hadn't planned to make. The paramedics worked quickly, checking the woman's vitals and preparing her for transport. One of them, a kind-faced woman with gray streaks in her hair, administered Narcan. Within moments, Annie's mother began to stir, coughing and confused. "Ma'am, you're going to be okay," the paramedic explained. "We're taking you to the hospital." Tom stood by Annie, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. The little girl watched everything with solemn eyes, clutching Hoppy to her chest. She didn't cry or ask questions. She just watched, like she'd seen this movie before and knew all the lines. "Will you go with Mommy in the big truck?" Annie asked Tom, looking up at him with those two old eyes. Tom shook his head gently. "I'm going to stay with you if that's okay. We need to make sure you're taken care of while your mommy gets better." As the paramedics prepared to move Annie's mother to the stretcher, Tom guided Annie into the living room. He cleared off the couch, pushing aside clothes and papers to make a place for her to sit. She perched on the edge, her legs dangling, too short to reach the floor. "Are you hungry?" Tom asked, realizing it might have been hours since the child had eaten. Annie nodded. "There's cereal, but no milk. Milk went bad." Tom went to the kitchen and opened a few cabinets. He found a box of crackers that seemed safe and brought them back. Annie took them gratefully, feeding one to Hoppy before taking a bite herself. While she ate, Tom made a call to child services. He kept his voice low, but in the small house, it was hard to be completely out of earshot. As he described the situation, mother overdosed, Child alone, no immediate family available, he watched Annie's face. She showed no reaction, no surprise at his words. This wasn't news to her. After ending the call, Tom sat beside Annie on the couch. Someone is coming to help us figure out where you'll stay while your mommy gets better at the hospital. I know, Annie said simply. The nice lady with the big purse. She came before. Tom felt that crack inside him widen. How many times had this scene played out in Annie's young life? How many nights had she spent stroking her unconscious mother's hair, waiting for help to arrive? Can I get some things for Hoppy? Annie asked. He needs his blanket if we're going somewhere. Of course, Tom said, his voice rougher than he intended. He followed Annie to her bedroom, where she pulled a small backpack from under her bed. Inside was a change of clothes, a toothbrush, and a tiny blanket for her stuffed rabbit. Tom realized with a jolt that Annie kept a go-bag ready. A 5-year-old with an emergency kit. You're very prepared, Tom said, trying to keep his tone light. Annie nodded as she carefully packed her things. Mommy has bad days sometimes. Miss Patty says I should be ready just in case. Miss Patty? The nice lady with the big purse. She says maybe next time I might stay somewhere else for a while. Tom helped Annie zip up her backpack. As they walked back to the living room, the paramedics were wheeling her mother out on the stretcher. Annie ran over and took her mother's limp hand. I'll be good, Mommy. Me and Hoppy will wait for you. Her mother, still groggy from the Narcan, squeezed her hand weakly. I'm sorry, baby. Mommy loves you. Tom watched the exchange, feeling like an intruder on something private and painful. The paramedics continued out, and Annie stood in the doorway watching until the ambulance doors closed. Back in the living room, waiting for child services to arrive, Tom found himself studying Annie as she sat quietly playing with Hoppy. She was thin, her clothes a bit too small, her hair unbrushed but clean. Despite everything, someone had tried to care for this child. A mother fighting her own demons had still managed to show love, however imperfectly. Officer Tom. Annie's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Yes, Annie? Will my mommy be okay this time? Tom felt the weight of her question, not just about her mother's immediate health, but about everything. Would her mother ever really be okay? Would Annie? He sat down beside her. The doctors will help your mommy feel better. But sometimes grown-ups have sicknesses that take a long time to get better. It's not your fault, and it's not your job to fix it. Annie nodded, considering his words with a seriousness no child should possess. That's what Miss Patty says too. She says I'm just supposed to be a kid. Tom felt the crack inside him deepen. Miss Patty is right. That's all you should have to be. The wait for child services felt endless. Tom sat with Annie on the couch, trying to distract her with simple games. They counted fingers, played rock, paper, scissors, and made hoppy hop across the cushions. Annie smiled a few times, but her eyes kept drifting to the front door waiting. When the doorbell finally rang, Tom felt Annie stiffen beside him. That's probably Miss Patty, he said gently. But it wasn't Miss Patty. The woman who introduced herself at the door was younger, with kind eyes and a tired smile. Hi, I'm Debbie from Child Services, she explained. Miss Patty is on another case tonight. Tom saw disappointment flash across Annie's face. She had been counting on seeing someone familiar, someone she trusted. He knelt down beside her. It's okay, Annie. Miss Debbie is here to help, just like Miss Patty would. Annie nodded, but held Hoppy tighter against her chest. While Tom briefed Debbie in low tones near the front door, Annie packed a few more things. A small photo of her mother, a colorful rock from her windowsill, a hairbrush with most of its bristles still intact. Each item went carefully into her backpack, like treasures being stored for safekeeping. She'll go to emergency foster care tonight, Debbie explained to Tom. We'll try to place her with someone in the same school district if possible. What about her mother? Tom asked. What happens when she's released from hospital? Debbie sighed, a sound that spoke of too many similar cases and too few happy endings. There will be an assessment. If this is her third overdose in 6 months, which our records suggest it is, she'll likely face court-mandated rehab. Maybe charges for child endangerment. Tom glanced at Annie, making sure she was still out of earshot. And Annie? Best case, Mom completes rehab successfully and Annie goes home in a few months. Worst case, Debbie didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. When it was time to leave, Annie walked to the front door without being told, her backpack strapped on, Hoppy tucked under her arm. She had done this before. She knew the drill. "Can Officer Tom come with us?" Annie asked suddenly, turning to Debbie with hopeful eyes. Debbie looked at Tom, then back to Annie. "Officer Tom needs to finish his police work, honey, but maybe he can check on you later if his job allows it." Tom felt something pull in his chest, a need to make sure this child would be okay, a reluctance to let her walk out of his life. "I'd like to do that, if it's allowed," he said, looking at Debbie. "Check in on her, I mean." Debbie seemed to study him for a moment. "I'll make a note in her file. You can call our office." Tom knelt down to Annie's level. "I'll come see how you're doing, okay? You and Hoppy be brave together." Annie surprised him by wrapping her small arms around his neck in a quick hug. "Bye, Officer Tom. Thank you for helping my mommy." As Tom watched Debbie lead Annie to the waiting car, he felt frozen in place. The little girl climbed into the back seat without fuss, buckled herself in, and pressed Hoppy to the window in a small wave. Then the car pulled away, taking Annie to yet another strange bed in yet another strange house. Tom stood on the porch long after the taillights disappeared around the corner. His shift had ended 2 hours ago. He should go home, shower off the day, try to sleep, but he knew sleep wouldn't come easily tonight. Back in his patrol car, Tom sat with his hands on the steering wheel, not yet starting the engine. He thought about Annie's calm acceptance of her situation. No tears, no tantrums, just quiet resignation from a child who had learned that crying didn't change anything. He thought about her mother fighting addiction while trying to parent. He'd seen the photos in the house, happy at times, a family intact. He wondered what had happened to the smiling woman in those pictures. What pain had she been trying to escape? Most of all, he thought about Annie's hug, those tiny arms around his neck, that simple thank you. Not for helping her, but for helping her mother. Even now, after everything, Annie's concern was for her mom. Tom finally started the car. As he drove away from Maple Street, he knew he wouldn't just file this away as another sad call, another broken family in a career full of them. Something about Annie, her resilience, her quiet strength, her ability to love despite everything, had worked its way under his skin. For the first time in years, Tom felt something beyond the professional detachment he'd cultivated to survive the job. He felt responsible, connected, changed. 3 days passed before Tom could find time to check on Annie. His shifts kept him busy with the usual calls, traffic stops, shoplifting, a bar fight that left 2 men with bloody noses and wounded pride. But through it all, his mind kept wandering back to the little girl with the stuffed rabbit. When he finally had a day off, Tom called the number Debbie had given him. After being transferred twice and put on hold for 15 minutes, he learned that Annie had been placed with a foster family on the other side of town. The social worker on the phone seemed surprised that a police officer was following up. "Most officers just file their reports and move on," she said. "I'm not most officers," Tom replied simply. He got the address of Annie's foster home and permission to visit. Before heading there, he stopped at a small toy store downtown. He wandered the aisles, feeling out of place among the colorful displays until he found what he was looking for. A tiny blue blanket sized perfectly for a stuffed rabbit. The foster home was a tidy ranch-style house with bikes in the driveway and a basketball hoop over the garage. Tom sat in his personal car, not the police cruiser, gathering his thoughts before going to the door. He wasn't here as Officer Reynolds today. He was just Tom, a guy who couldn't stop thinking about a little girl's welfare. A woman in her 50s answered his knock. She introduced herself as Linda, Annie's temporary foster mom. Her voice was warm but cautious. "Annie mentioned you might come by," Linda said, leading Tom into a living room bright with afternoon sunlight. "She'll be happy to see you. She's in the backyard with the other kids." Through the window, Tom could see 4 children playing on a swing set. Annie was sitting on a bench to the side, watching the others play but not joining in. Even from a distance, Tom could see Hoppy clutched in her lap. When Linda called her inside, Annie's face lit up at the sight of Tom. She ran to him but stopped just short of a hug, suddenly shy. "You came," she said, her voice small but pleased. "I promised I would," Tom replied. He held out the small gift bag with the blue blanket. "This is for Hoppy." Annie's eyes widened as she pulled out the blanket. She immediately wrapped it around her stuffed rabbit, tucking the edges in with careful precision. "He gets cold at night," she explained seriously. "Thank you." Linda offered them cookies and juice in the kitchen while she prepared dinner. As Annie dunked her cookie in her juice, making Tom smile despite himself, he asked her how she was doing. "It's okay here," Annie said. "They have rules about bedtime and brushing teeth, but Linda is nice. There's another little girl who sleeps in my room. She snores like a train." Tom laughed. "Do you like school?" Annie shrugged. "I miss my friends. I have to go to a different school now." The words hit Tom hard. Every change in housing meant another school, more unfamiliar faces, more explanations about why she lived with strangers instead of her mom. Linda joined them at the table, her voice low. "Annie's doing well, considering everything. She's very self-sufficient for her age." Tom nodded. He knew that wasn't entirely a compliment. No 5-year-old should have to be self-sufficient. "Have you heard anything about her mother?" Tom asked carefully, aware of Annie listening. Linda shook her head slightly. "Not much. She's still in the hospital, but will likely transfer to a treatment facility soon." Tom noticed Annie's fingers tightening around Hoppy. "Your mommy is working hard to get better," Tom told her. "That's a good thing." Annie nodded. "I know. She tries really hard sometimes." The simple faith in her voice made Tom's throat tighten. After chatting a while longer, he knew it was time to leave. Annie walked into the door, Hoppy and his new blanket in tow. "Would you come back?" she asked, her eyes serious. Tom didn't hesitate. "Yes, I'll come back." On the drive home, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that something important was happening to him. He'd seen countless children in bad situations over his 15 years on the force. He'd felt sad for them, sure had done his job and moved on. Why was Annie different? That night, Tom sat at his kitchen table, staring at the adoption websites he'd pulled up on his laptop. He wasn't married, had never even seriously considered having kids. His job took up most of his life. But something had broken open inside him that night on Maple Street, something that made him question everything he'd assumed about his future. He picked up his phone and dialed his sister's number. When she answered, he took a deep breath. "Deanne? I need your advice about something important." 6 months later, Tom stood in the spare bedroom of his house, paintbrush in hand, stepping back to admire his work. The walls, once a plain beige, were now a soft yellow, sunshine yellow, according to the paint can. Star-shaped stickers dotted the ceiling, designed to glow in the dark when the lights went out. In the corner stood a new bed with a colorful quilt his sister Diane had helped him pick out. A small bookshelf was already filled with picture books. A nightlight shaped like a crescent moon waited to be plugged in. Everything was ready. Tom's phone rang. It was Debbie from Child Services. "We're on our way," she said. "Annie's very excited." Tom's heart raced as he hung up. After months of paperwork, home visits, background checks, and parenting classes, today was finally the day. Annie was coming to live with him as his foster child, with the possibility of adoption down the road if her mother couldn't maintain her sobriety. It hadn't been an easy journey. Tom's sister thought he was crazy at first. "You've never even dated anyone with kids," she had pointed out. "And now you want to be a single dad to a traumatized 5-year-old. But after meeting Annie during one of Tom's visits to the foster home, Diane had changed her tune. "I get it now," she had told him afterward. "She's special." Annie's mother had been in and out of treatment, trying her best but struggling with the demons that had haunted her since her husband's death. She had initially been suspicious of Tom's interest in her daughter, fearing he was trying to take Annie away. But over time, during supervised visits at the treatment center, she had come to see that Tom genuinely cared about Annie's well-being. Last month, in a moment of clarity and courage, she had signed papers agreeing to a long-term foster arrangement with Tom, with continued visitation rights for herself. "I love her enough to want what's best for her," she had said through tears. "Right now, that's not me." The doorbell rang, pulling Tom from his thoughts. He wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans and went to answer it. Annie stood on his porch, Hoppy the rabbit tucked under her arm as always, the blue blanket Tom had given her still wrapped around the stuffed animal. Her backpack looked newer. Tom had learned that Diane had taken her shopping for school supplies, but she still clutched it like it held all her worldly possessions. In many ways it did. "Hi, Officer Tom," Annie said shyly, then corrected herself. "I mean just Tom." "Hi, Annie," Tom replied, kneeling down to her level. "Welcome home." The word home seemed to catch her by surprise. She looked past him into the house, her eyes wide and cautious. "I can stay here. Really stay." "Really stay," Tom confirmed. "Want to see your room?" Annie nodded, and Tom led her down the hallway, Debbie following with a smile. When they reached the yellow bedroom, Annie stood in the doorway, taking it all in. For a moment, Tom worried he'd done too much, overwhelming her with new things when she was used to having so little. But then Annie turned to him, her eyes shining. "Is this all for me?" "All for you," Tom said. "And Hoppy too, of course." Annie walked slowly around the room, touching the quilt, looking at the books, testing the squishiness of the pillow. When she reached the window, she gasped. Outside was a small backyard with a swing set Tom had spent 2 weekends installing with help from his fellow officers. "Can I go swing?" she asked, bouncing slightly on her toes, the most childlike excitement Tom had seen from her yet. "Of course," Tom said. "This is your home now. You can swing whenever you want." While Debbie finished going through some final paperwork with Tom, Annie played in the backyard, Hoppy propped up on a nearby chair so he could watch her swing. Later, after Debbie left, Tom and Annie made pizza together for dinner. Annie was careful at first, afraid of making a mess or doing something wrong. But when Tom deliberately dropped a handful of cheese on the floor and laughed about it, she began to relax. As they sat at the kitchen table eating their slightly misshapen pizza, Annie looked up at Tom. "Do I have to leave when my mommy gets better?" Tom put down his slice. "Your mommy and I talked about that. She wants you to be happy and safe. If she gets better, and I hope she does, she'll come visit you here a lot. But this is your home now, as long as you want it to be." Annie seemed to think about this as she fed a tiny piece of pizza crust to Hoppy. "I think Hoppy likes it here," she said finally. "I'm glad," Tom replied, his voice rough with emotion. "I like having both of you here." That night, as Tom tucked Annie into her new bed, he realized how completely his life had changed in 6 short months. All because of a routine disturbance call, a call he almost hadn't taken because his shift was ending. All because of a little girl who had looked up at him with brave eyes while stroking her mother's hair. "Good night, Annie," he whispered, turning on the crescent moon nightlight. "Good night," she mumbled sleepily, already half dreaming. "See you tomorrow." Those 3 words, "see you tomorrow," held a promise Tom intended to keep for all the tomorrows to come.